Good morning, everyone, and thank you for finding time today again to join this session, where we will continue with our introduction and discussion on emerging technologies that. Good morning, everyone. That we believe can be thank used. You for finding time today again to join this session. Where there's some echo. So these technologies that we are discussing today is the blockchain technology, which is part of the technologies that we had mentioned that are emerging that can be used to achieve the SDGs, the UN SDGs, which are 17 in number. As I'd mentioned earlier on, that the main accelerating factor that these emerging technologies provide is that they take us towards a zero marginal cost society, where the cost of producing or offering an additional service is approaching zero as technology advances. And we've seen this happen in many of the technologies that we've discussed. And the zero marginal cost society is also characterized by a sharing economy, where participants in the market adopt a different market approach in as far as the exchange of goods and services are concerned. And we are having more peer-to-peer exchange of services as opposed to a centralized way in which you exchange services and value. A good example of peer-to-peer exchange is when you book Airbnb, let's say apartment to stay in. You're not really dealing directly with a registered hotel or a business entity or a centralized institution. You're dealing directly with the apartment's owner. The same thing for when you hail a cab like Bolt or Taxify. I mean, Bolt or a Little Cab or Uber. You are simply participating in a peer-to-peer sharing economy. So the same has also been advanced in other areas, and we're going to see how blockchain as a technology is revolutionary in that it will give us a way in which we can track the exchange of value online in the digital space. So a lot of people came across blockchain for the first time when people were discussing cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the rest. And majority of the discussion around blockchain is usually centered around cryptocurrencies. And that has made it difficult for people to actually appreciate the true value or the significance of blockchain to the economy. And many people have dismissed it and never bothered really to understand it further, because even the way cryptocurrency is introduced to them is not easy to understand. So this session is essentially aimed at discussing blockchain. We are not going to discuss, this is not a discussion about cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies is just but one of the applications of blockchain. Cryptocurrencies to blockchain is equivalent to email to the internet. Email is one way in which you can use the internet, but it is not the internet. The same way, cryptocurrencies are not blockchain in their entirety. They are just part of. And in our discussion, you'll discover that they are just a very small part or a way in which blockchain technology can be utilized. But before we go there, I'd like us to briefly look at a historical bit of how we as humans develop trust. There's a lot of discussion online on this, but what we are going to say is that as humans, we do very many transactions in our daily lives. We buy things from the supermarket, that is goods. We also buy services. Maybe you go to the salon or the kinyozi and get shaved. We also buy assets like land, motor vehicles, and many other things. And we also do investments. So all these transactions that we do in our offline world usually happen because we have found mechanisms in the offline world to lower the uncertainty that is accompanied by that exchange. And a good example is if I am buying land, I lower the uncertainty that the person I'm transacting with could be defrauding me by making sure that I get a title deed. And this title deed from this person is not just a document that they've drafted. There is a central institution that has issued this title deed, which is the government or the lands department. And by the fact that this person has given me this title deed and confirmed that this land is their land, and I can also do my checks by going to do a land search, we lower the uncertainty of this transaction by involving third-party institutions, such as the Department of Lands. The same thing if I go to a supermarket and I pick some goods and decide to go home with them. I have to pay the supermarket. We have to exchange value, and I can pay them in form of currency. So how do they know that the currency I've given them is, or the M-Pesa that I've paid is really genuine, or I won't be defrauding them? We lower that uncertainty by involving an institution known as the central bank, which will issue currency, the currency that I've given the supermarket. So historically, we have been involving institutions that act as intermediaries when we are transacting with each other. Banks, for example, the land office, law courts, market authorities, and regulators. Yeah. These traditional institutions that we've discussed, most of the time are usually formed by governments, or sometimes formed by private businesses. And these private businesses could be, for example, banks, could be any other institution that is trusted. Yeah. If, for example, I'm procuring the services of an architect, I lower my uncertainty that this architect will do a bad job by involving the architect's registration body. I might ask him, are you registered as an architect? Can I see your registration license? The same thing for lawyers. You cannot represent somebody in court if you are not up to date with your membership, the LSK. So in all our traditional transactions, we are involving institutions. Now, the challenge that has come is that when the internet came, we have been attempting since then to replicate what we have done in the offline world to the online world. And that so far, according to me, hasn't worked very well. Yeah. And there have been a rise in number of online fraud. In fact, these days, people no longer focus so much on offline defrauding others offline. It's easier to do it online. It is easier to defraud somebody online via either the internet, via SMS. I'm sure all of you have received those SMSs that try to defraud you some money. I don't know if any of you has never received that message, but many people have received those messages, and many people have received scam emails and so on and so forth. And this is because when we replicated what we do offline to the online world, we lost some form of authenticity or authentication due to the lack of offline verification attributes. Yeah. If I'm dealing, for example, with a business that is selling me something, and they say we can supply you this and this and this, and in the offline world, might maybe tell them, I'll come to your offices and maybe take the discussion further from your offices. That is one way of actually authenticating that these people are genuine, by visiting their offices. Or I might want to verify the authenticity of whatever they're selling me by first physically seeing it. But with the introduction of the internet, I might be buying a book or a bicycle or a vehicle in Japan. How do I verify that that Japanese guy emailing me invoices and asking me to pay to this bank account is actually a genuine organization, or is a genuine person who actually sells cars and not some conman online? So with that, we've lost a lot of ability to trust people online. And there are many methods that have been tried, but it has been seen that so far, blockchain is one of the best ways in which we can create trust online. Yeah. And trust is not just in terms of exchanging money or goods, but in terms of identification, proving identification, for example, proving traceability, for example. There's usually talk of Nairobi vegetables being toxic. I think you've seen those newspaper articles that if you're buying vegetables in Nairobi, majority of them maybe contain toxins, or maybe zimepandwa kwa sewage. So there's all that. So how do I verify that the vegetables I'm buying from Mama Mboga were actually not using human sewage effluent? How do I verify that these apples that I'm being told were grown organically are actually organic? Right now, it's very difficult. And then the reason why it's difficult is because in as much as there are records across, if I go to the farm where these apples were grown, for example, if I had a way of knowing where they were grown and I go there, they might actually prove to me and say, yes, look at what we do. We are actually planting these apples organically. But that info wasn't carried forward all the way to the supermarket where I bought those apples. That info remains with that farm. Then I might also be wanting to know, were these apples transported at the right temperature from the farm all the way to the supermarket? And how long did they take along the way? Or I'm buying apples today and then tomorrow they're all gone bad. Yeah. Many a times you've gone to buy something, maybe some food, and then like if you go to Tuskys or any of these supermarkets that have the delicatessen where you buy food, there is no time where you'll ask hii chakula ilipikwa leo. They tell you hapana, hii ni ya juzi. They always say hii ni fresh, imetoka jikoni sahi. And often that is not usually the case. How do you verify that whatever they are telling you is true? How do I verify that if I'm buying organically grown apples, they were actually organically grown apples? That traceability can be enabled by blockchain very easily. Because in the current situation, the farmer has his records in terms of this was grown organically, and I might have to go there and confirm. The transporter maybe has his records saying, look at the temperature of this refrigerated truck all the way from the farm to the supermarket. And the supermarket might have its record saying these apples arrived on Saturday. So today being a Thursday, they're not really fresh. So all that data is not accessible to me in one go. I need to buy this apple and immediately confirm that, yes, this is what I'm buying, and many other things. So blockchain is able also to do that for us, and we'll see how that comes in, especially in the supply chain. And as I've mentioned, the records that we keep, for example, the farmer, if they have a record of what they've been doing in the farm, and the transport company has a record of how they transported the apples and at what temperature, and the supermarket also has a record of when they were received, how many were received, at what temperature they were received, and all that. All those points where we have those records are known as ledgers. It's simply a ledger. A ledger is simply a document or a book, not necessarily a paper book, but it's simply a document where we can enter transactions or we can store records. The farmer might have a ledger saying, we put this number of tons of cow dung manure to this 1 acre of farm, and we met the set requirements for the amount of manure in an acre of farm for apples. He might also have a record that says this dung is from cows that were grass-fed, not fed any other type of feed. So all that is ledger, and he might have a record also saying we harvested these apples on this day. The transport company also has its own way of recording, and the supermarket and so on. So all forms of transactions and all forms of record keeping that we have are usually in ledger format. The banks have banking ledgers where in my account ledger, there is the credits and debits. In another person's ledger, there's the credits and debits. And if you go to the land ministry, they are what are known as green cards and title deeds. The green card is a form of ledger that shows that since the day this land was gazetted as land that can be given to the public and sold and exchanged, maybe it was part of a very large 200 or 500 acre ranch. Then 5 years later, it was subdivided into 100 acre pieces. Then one guy who has the 100 acres decided to subdivide that into quarter acre pieces and sold. So how does that guy who has bought a quarter acre confirm that indeed this guy selling me this land is not a fraud? They can easily do that by going to the lands office and doing a search and even get the green card and say, oh, okay, so this guy who says selling me this land actually bought it from so and so and so and so and so and so. The same thing also, there's a ledger in the citizens registry that has our details, our ID numbers, where we were born, the year we were born, our legal names, and so on and so forth. As a regulator, you might also have maybe a list or a ledger of licensed or paid up operators. That here we have 15 operators, but only 12 have paid up. So that is a form of ledger. And we trust these documents because of these institutions. I trust that green card because I went to the lands office. I would not trust a green card that was brought to me in a pub by some shadowy guy telling me, in your green card, yeah, in your shamba. I would want to read that green card when I'm in the lands office, yeah? And that is how we build trust offline. But that is very hard to replicate online. So how do we enable trust online? Now, in simple terms, if there is anything that you're going to take away from this session, is that a blockchain is a trust machine. It's a machine or a technology that is used to build trust. Yeah, that is all you need to take from this course. If you're not going to get anything, but I'm sure you'll understand the rest of the session. But a blockchain is a trust machine. And a blockchain is defined as a distributed and immutable ledger technology that enables us to track anything such as transactions, stock levels, assets, objects, data, and anything else that we fancy. So any record that we keep in the offline world, we can use blockchain to keep that record in the online space, and not only do that, but also transfer with it an element of trust. The traditional way of keeping records using databases and maybe files online that store this information only transferred the information, but did not transfer the trust. So you can have a document, a scanned PDF of a title, yeah, online. I have no way of knowing whether this title is genuine if it's a scanned document. So how do I not only give you the title, but also show or build trust online to tell you that whatever I've given you is the real deal? That's where blockchain comes in. And blockchain has redefined how digital transactions are verified and stored, and that is done through the use of distributed ledger technologies. And the question that usually comes in is, what is a distributed ledger technology? Again, we've said that transactions online are usually, even offline, are usually kept in a ledger. So we simply take the same ledger that exists offline and then put it online, not lift and shift, but we take the same concept that we have used in the offline world and take it online. For example, if I have a ledger that is for my bank account with the debit side and credit side, and it had been written in a book or it was in a database somewhere, I can take the same and take it online, but add an element of trust in it. And when I take it online to a distributed ledger, the challenge then becomes, how do I trust that this ledger is correct? Because if you wrote into this ledger saying that you have 100 acres, what makes me trust you that you actually have 100 acres and you didn't just add a 0 to your initial 10 acres for the purposes of defrauding me? So we say that if you are going to keep the ledger online, don't keep a copy alone. For you to prove that this transaction is genuine, your ledger should be distributed to several people. Like, let's say we have a ledger distributed to 10 people online. And any change in one of those distributed ledgers is propagated to the other copies that are being held by the other people. Yeah. And it can only be propagated if we verify that the change is genuine. Yeah, there's a way which you can verify that this change is genuine. And that is the way that we build the first level of trust. So if we go and read these 10 ledgers and we find that 8 say you have 10 acres and 2 say you have 100 acres, then we must build consensus and agree that actually in all the 10 ledgers we've read, 8 say you have 10 acres, while only 2 say you have 100 acres. So we will build consensus and agree that these blocks or these ledgers that say you have 10 acres are the correct ones. And the other 2 will be ignored. And so on and so forth. That is one way, but we'll discuss that in detail as we go on. Now, the question that usually comes is, why is it called a blockchain? And why blocks and chains, first of all? Why not another term? Initially, it used to be called blockchain, as in two separate words. But it's now known as blockchain as one word. Yeah. Now, a block is a record of a transaction. And, and this transaction can either be the value or the information that has been exchanged, and also contains who the participants in this exchange are. So you are selling me land and I'm interested in buying. So me and you are participants in that exchange. A chain is a way to interconnect things, and we use chains to interconnect blocks by evidence of a previous transaction. That might not make sense now, but you'll see what I mean later. Yeah. That we say that you are selling me this land, saying that it belongs to you. How sure am I that it belongs to you? Then you say, here, look at the title. You see my name there? Before me, there was this guy. And before this guy, there was this other guy. And for you to prove that this title is genuine, you can go to the lands department and get the green card, which also has that info that shows the historical subdivisions of this land. And they are all interlinked from the first large piece of land that was maybe 1,000 acres up to the time when it was subdivided and sold off maybe in quarter-acre plots. There's a chain of information that links those quarter plots all the way back to the original piece of land that was maybe several thousands of acres. Yeah. So a block contains evidence of the preceding transactions. So when you have a block, it is a record of all what has taken place previously. And because we are building consensus online, if we have a blockchain, for example, of land transactions, for example, if there are blockchains for the Department of Lands that are running, and we have 1,000 people who are managing these blocks, who are participating in these blocks, yeah? And those who participate in these blocks are all the people who bought land. These 1,000 people or 10,000 people are the landowners. These landowners are participating in this blockchain, and each of the landowners keeps a record of all the land transactions that have ever happened. So if somebody, the 10,000th and first person joins and decides I need to buy land, or comes in and starts to do fraudulent transactions, it will be very easy to point out that this guy who is trying to transact, according to what all the other people have in record, it does not tally. So if he's trying to sell land to, let's say another person, let's say a Kamau somewhere, and Kamau wonders, is this guy really genuine? This deal looks too good to be true. He'll go to the blockchain and see, oh, out of all the land owners who are running this blockchain, it is only you and this other guy who are saying that you own this land. And these all other records do not show that you own this land. So you could be defrauding me. And this is a record. Remember I said that a blockchain is immutable. This is a record that cannot be altered. So this fraudster trying to create a block of his own that is different from what everyone has, it will be very easy to spot them. And if there was a way in which this person can gain access to all these other blocks that these other people are having and try to modify all of them, some calculations show that with our current computing power and our current power supply, this person would need a lot of computing power and a lot of time and a lot of electric power to be able to modify all these transactions. And the reason I'm saying that is because these records are not just stored plainly, showing Tom sold land to Abdi 5 acres for 2 million. They're not plain like that. They are usually encrypted. So to decrypt all the records and modify each record in each block in each block in the chain would take extremely long time. And that is why we say that blockchains are immutable. Once a record is saved, that's it. It cannot be modified forever and ever. There's another podcast I was listening to that was saying that for somebody, for example, to compromise the Bitcoin system that is currently running, they would need computing power that would cost them, if they went to the cloud and bought computing power, they would need computing power that would cost them 17 billion US dollars, billion with a B, to be able to alter all the Bitcoin records that exist today. So you can imagine how that puts off very many people, that it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to modify these records. So if I see something in a blockchain and consensus in that blockchain says that this is the true record, then it is, because no one has the capability in terms of computing power to modify these records. Now, I think we are together up to there. And I'd mentioned that in a blockchain, there are participants. And a participant can be a customer. For example, somebody buying something, like me buying apples from the supermarket. It could be a supplier. It could be that farmer who is supplying apples to the supermarket. It could be the government that is interested in knowing, did you spray the right chemicals to these plants, or did you follow the guidelines in as far as quality of your produce is concerned? It could be the regulator again. It could be the banking regulator. It could be the regulator that is in charge of produce quality. It could be anyone. Then, other than participants, there are transactions. Transactions are what we do normally. Mwangi sells a pickup to Kamau. Yeah, that is a transaction. William buys land from John. Yeah, that is a transaction. Mike gives Tom 1 million. I hope the universe is listening. Mike gives Tom $1 million. That is a transaction. So anything that we do to interact with someone where value is exchanged, that's a transaction. Or anything we do where a record is kept, that is a transaction. And then, of course, the third thing which makes up a blockchain is a contract. Yes, Mwangi has given, or Mwangi has sold the pickup to Kamau, but that will only be true if Kamau pays Mwangi, and then the pickup ownership will be transferred. And if William doesn't pay for that piece of land, then John might not give him the title deed. Yeah. So those are contracts. And when it comes to blockchain, the question then is, how do I make sure that these contracts are enforceable? Yeah. We'll look at what are known as smart contracts later and see what they do. And by saying it's a contract, it does not mean that it is a legally binding contract. We need to be clear on that. A contract does not necessarily to be legally binding. And those are the issues that we'll look at when we come to the regulatory aspect. So things to remember in a blockchain: there are participants, there are the transactions, what those participants are doing, and there are the contracts that come into effect when those people are transacting. I've mentioned about the distributed ledger, and we've said that a distributed ledger is a record of all transactions across the network of participants. So participants can form depending on their needs. Yeah. By participant, it doesn't mean that if Kenya decides to adopt blockchain, then we are all participants. The government might say, we are going to start a lands registry blockchain. So the participants in this blockchain will be all people who own land right now. All those are the participants. Yeah. The supermarket might decide, or the regulator, for example, Kenya Bureau of Standards might decide that we are going to start a produce assurance mechanism for all the food stuff that is consumed in Kenya. So the participants to this blockchain are going to be the farmers, the transporters, the supermarkets, mama mboga, and the people who buy, and maybe us as Kenya Bureau of Standards, and maybe another body, maybe NEMA or any other interested party. Another blockchain might be formed maybe by the Ministry of Education. They might say, we want to create an academic transcripts or exam results blockchain. And the participants in this blockchain are going to be all the schools, all the students, and all the parents, and all the stakeholders in the education sector. So those are going to be the participants. So in that scenario, if a distributed ledger, for example, for lands, the participants are all the landowners, then it will be in their interest to make sure that those records are correct. And it will be in the interest of the Ministry of Lands or the Lands Department to make sure that when the blockchain is started, it is not started off with the wrong records. Because it is possible right now to start a blockchain of land in Kenya and use all the wrong data and the crooked data that is available due maybe to corruption and failure of governance mechanisms. Yeah? So we might start a blockchain that says the land near maybe the SGR belongs to me, yeah, when you're starting the blockchain, but that's actually not true. Maybe that land belongs to someone else. But remember, when we start that blockchain and we say that that land belongs to Tom, and that blockchain keeps on being used by all the participants and they all keep a record, then it will be very hard to change that record. So one thing you need to note is that when a blockchain is being started, it is very important that the initial conditions and the initial records are as accurately and there's consensus, as accurate as possible, and there's consensus among the participants that yes, this is the true status in the offline world. Even as we go online, we agree that this is what should go online. So when the lands department wants to start a blockchain, they will not just take their records and immediately start creating the blocks. There might be a verification process maybe for maybe 6 months, and they say all title deed owners need to maybe visit the nearest land office and do a verification step, or maybe log to this website and do 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So once all that is verified, and then the blockchain can be started. So when it is started, it is accurate. It is accurate that yes, the land near the SGR station is Tom's, and 10 transactions later, I might have sold it to someone else. Yeah, it might belong to someone else, You might have sold it to person one, who sold it to person two, who subdivided it and sold it to 10 people. One of these 10 people subdivided it maybe and sold it to 6 other people. 2 of these 10 people maybe decided to merge together and merge their adjacent pieces of land into one for reasons known to them. All those records will be there, and they'll all be based by the fact that I was the original owner. And that is the record that will be there forever in that blockchain of land records. And all the participants or all the landowners will have a copy of that ledger. So in short, the land registry moves from the lands department and being managed centrally by the lands department, where there are few people who can be compromised and modify records. And it moves to being managed by every landowner in the country. And we set mechanisms around us to ensure that there's trust and to ensure that there's consensus when a transaction happens. Yeah. So when we are all keeping the records and we notice there's a transaction that the land next to standard media house that is there is now being sold. If it is being sold by the owner, we will all get that update. But this person buying this land would wonder, are you really the owner? Let me go to the blockchain and check and see, okay, since the record of time, this is the guy who has been appearing in all steps when a blockchain, when a land is sold. So if there was land sold in Mombasa, the blockchain, the block owned by somebody seated in Nyahururu will change and keep that record. The same for the person seated in Kisumu, Turkana, Kilifi, as long as all of them were landowners. So if a new participant comes in, this guy who has just made money and wants to buy that piece of land and joins the blockchain because now he's a landowner and therefore becomes a participant, before he buys this land from Mr. XYZ and Sons Limited, he needs to verify. Let me look at all these blocks. Is it true that this guy owns this land, and who did he buy it from? And from whoever he bought it from, who did he buy it from? So all those records are there. And it is therefore difficult for any fraud to happen. So that is just a way in which blockchain, for example, can be used to eliminate, forget about reducing, eliminate corruption in the lands department. And I'm not saying that because I have been directly affected by, actually I have, come to think of it, affected by land fraud in the lands department. But the point is that blockchain presents us with a very powerful mechanism to change how trust is managed in our daily transactions. Because what we are seeing now is that centralized authorities or institutions are no longer capable of enforcing trust because of our human fallibility. Mtu anakuja anasema ile green card hebu toa, later to modify tuandike ingine. And then the original green card that was there is replaced by another. You go there knowing that your lawyer told you, make sure you see the green card. You go there, you see a green card, but it is a counterfeit green card. So with blockchain, you can eliminate all that. And that is the reason why even His Excellency the President formed a blockchain and AI task force. I think you heard about it. Because that is how significant blockchain is, that it presents us with an opportunity to radically change how we transact and keep records. We want to move to a place where when we keep a record, it cannot be edited by anyone. Absolutely. So that closes the door for any corrupt dealings. So a ledger entry, as I've said, is replicated across. And I've said if land is sold in Mombasa, the guy in Kisumu and in Turkana, in Nairobi, in Kitui, in Rodikopanyi, they will all get that update that, oh, that land near Nyali Hotel to Mr. So-and-so, and that record will be saved. They might not necessarily consciously get an alert maybe on their phone, but their copy of the distributed ledger is updated. Yeah, their copy is updated. And the other thing is, we do not want to have a situation where somebody can buy maybe an 1/8 quarter of land and then join the land blockchain, and then when he's in, go snooping. Utom watu namwona huku tu kumbe ni donga hivi. Then they see, this guy has a lot of land. So I want my privacy when I'm doing my transactions. In as much as I want an element of trust online, I want my privacy to be protected. Yes, you know that piece of land was owned by Mr. So-and-so, and that Mr. So-and-so might not really be my name. It might be my digital ID. Yeah. So when the government talks of digital IDs and the concept behind Huduma number, it is aimed at creating a system where we have online unique digital IDs that can identify us. So you know, ID number 424196 owns this piece of land. But this 4241219690 is actually not my actual ID number as Tom, but it has been encrypted by encryption mechanisms online to protect who I am. But you know that this person, this person owns this land, and there's a way of verifying that. Now, what would prevent a fraudster from joining the blockchain? He buys a quarter an acre, joins the blockchain, then decides now it is my time to eat. Wacha nionyeshe hawa watu. Then he goes on modifying the records. Yeah. As I've said, we need to protect the privacy of people participating. And then we need to authenticate and verify that indeed this person selling this piece of land next to Nation House, or this piece of land next to the SGR, is actually the owner. So when he makes a ledger entry and adjust the land's blockchain, we will need first to authenticate that this is indeed the person. And for that to happen, this person must have the digital ID of the owner of that land to transfer it. So if the digital ID of the actual owner is 1234, and this fraudster's digital ID is 5678, then he cannot go into the blockchain and attempt to transfer that land unless the original owner was very careless and let out his digital ID, and somebody got to know of his digital ID. So that is the only time when maybe that might happen, but there are also mechanisms of protecting against that, as you'll see. Yeah. And as I've said, I do not want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to know that I am in a land buying spree. So my participation in the transaction activity needs to be private. So those are the requirements for somebody to edit this distributed ledger. So in a nutshell, what you're saying is we are removing centralized institutional based form of verification and trust away from traditional institutions to the crowd, to the general public. Yeah. So this is a form of crowdsourced trust, where we say, hii land ministry imekuwa corrupt sana. Let us do this ourselves. Yeah. Let us do this ourselves. Let us run a blockchain and manage this thing effectively. And we trust that whatever we do, and based on the of the measures we've put in place, we will be able to trust these records. And this is our consensus mechanism. We will agree that if we have 10 records and more than 5 are right, we believe the more than 5. The rest, we don't believe them. So that is our consensus. Yeah. So how do we ensure that these records or these blocks, remember we said a block contains the record of the transaction, contains the record of the name of the names, I mean the IDs, not the names per se like Tom or Paul, but the IDs of the participants in the transaction, and also contains a copy of the previous record in that transaction chain. Yeah. And by a copy of the previous record, I don't mean a record that says the previous record was Mwangi sold the land to maybe Njoroge. I don't mean that kind of record. I mean that transaction where Mwangi sold land to Njoroge can be passed through an encryption mechanism to generate a number which will be very unique to this transaction between Mwangi and Njoroge. And if I'm the next person to sell land in Kenya, after Mwangi and Njoroge sold their land yesterday, before I sell my land to someone else, in the transaction block that I will create for this transaction of land, I need also to show that I'm part of this chain by getting a copy of the last transaction and incorporate it in my block of transactions. So how do we ensure trust that all what we are saving and taking forward in this blockchain that we are building? So any new transaction adds a block. So yesterday's transaction between Mwangi and Njoroge added a block. Maybe there were 70 blocks at that time, or 7,000 blocks at that time. Because maybe since the time we started the blockchain, when the land ministry started the blockchain, there were 7,000 transactions up to yesterday. Today, when I'm selling my land to Mohammed, I will need to add my block to this chain to become the 7,001st block in this chain. And for me to attach my transaction to this chain, I need to have the records of yesterday's transaction, because that is the link. Yeah. And that record of yesterday's transaction, as I've said, is usually encrypted and is usually known as a hash. We'll see that later. What is a hash? Yeah. Because that record shouldn't come to me like Mwangi of Langata sold 2 acres of land in Kino to Njoroge of Tindigwa. No, it will come as a hash. I'll know this is yesterday's transaction. I might not know who it is or what was sold, but yes, I can confirm this yesterday's transaction and I can use this as part of my new block for me to add that block. If I don't do that, then my block will not exist in the blockchain of land transactions, and the guy I'm selling the land to will realize, and no, when conman, yeah, and even save my number, Tom Land Conman. Yeah. So all the participants in the blockchain work together to verify and authenticate these records, as I've said. We all work together to verify because it is our interest. And we trust that these records and transactions are okay, and the participants are who they say they are by way of consensus. So that is how trust is built. And by consensus, I don't mean we sit together ama we do a Zoom session and nod our heads. Hiyo nimekubali na hiyo hata usiniulize tena hiyo, consider it done. No. Consensus is actually an algorithm, a computer algorithm that has a way of building consensus around all what is happening, and we'll see that. Now, how do we verify that these transactions, as I've mentioned, are genuine? We've said one way is by use of digital signatures to verify the identification of the participants. The same way when you go to Lands Ministry at the banking hall and say, I need this type of service or fill this form, I need to do this search. You must produce your national ID or maybe a copy of the title that you want to search. Yeah. And maybe that copy might need to be certified by an advocate. That is one way of verifying that you're not just some random guy who's out to mine data for people's lands. So each ledger entry needs to be authenticated and a commitment received that the entry or transaction will not be reversed. But then how do I authenticate that this transaction is genuine when the people who are participating in these transactions have their are enjoying anonymity? Yeah. So you will only see some random number which represents me online, and I might con you. I might con you land, yet I'm your friend. Oh, unajua tu kuna mtu alinicon kwa hiyo blockchain na mtu nikimpata, and that time you're telling me, yet I'm the one who conned you, because you have no way of knowing that it's me. So how do you verify, or how do you build trust in such an environment? We will see how that is done. And the best way is by use of what we call digital signatures, and ensuring that we use encryption mechanisms that are foolproof. As I've said, for you to decrypt all those transactions, for example, in the blockchain that runs cryptocurrency Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you need to understand, when people talk of Bitcoin, these are just participants who came together and decided, we are 10 of us. We all have $100. Let us build a blockchain where we can exchange these dollars online, and we verify that indeed we are who we say we are, and we trust each other in this transaction. So Bitcoin is one way of utilizing blockchains. It is not the blockchain. The same way email is one way of utilizing the internet. It is not the internet. There is more to it. So let's see a video of how blockchains work in a nutshell. And it's basically what we've discussed, but let's see a video which might explain it better than I would.
Since the days of clay tablets, people have recorded the exchange of goods and services. As we evolve into the digital age, recording these transactions has become much more complex. Whether it's the exchange of money between two parties, documenting how goods move through a supply chain, or making contractual agreements. The growth of global commerce and trade has created a network of disparate ledger systems, vulnerable to errors, fraud, and misinterpretation. Take the diamond industry, for example. The journey of a diamond from mine to consumer covers a complex landscape of legal, regulatory, financial, manufacturing, and commercial practices. Current supply chains have to rely on intermediaries every step of the way, from government officials to lawyers, accountants, dealers, and banks. This adds time and cost. Diamond smuggling and fraud can hamper governments from collecting fair export taxes, and consumers and retailers face the prospect of purchasing counterfeit or unethically mined stones. This is where Hyperledger blockchain technology comes in. It has the potential to eliminate these vulnerabilities with transparent transactions. Blockchain offers all parties involved in a business network a secure and synchronized record of transactions. The blockchain ledger records every sequence of transactions from beginning to end, whether it's hundreds of steps in a supply chain or a single online payment. As each transaction occurs, it's put into a block. Each block is connected to the one before and after it. Groups of transactions are blocked together and a fingerprint of each block is added to the next, thus creating an irreversible chain. That's why blockchain is ideal for recording the mining, refining, and distribution of one of the most valuable goods in the world. It can trace a diamond's path from the mine to the hands of the consumer with exceptional security and transparency. While blockchain works with all types of transactions, there are three key features that make Hyperledger blockchain uniquely capable to handle the requirements of a regulated industry like diamonds. It's distributed, it's permissioned, and it's secure. Because the ledger is distributed, it works as a shared form of record keeping, ensuring no one person or organization holds ownership of the system. As the diamond cycles through its supply chain, everyone involved during the process is permissioned to have a copy of every record and piece of data, and no transaction can be added to the chain without consensus across the participants. This means no one person can add to or alter the blockchain without it being permanently recorded, making it tamper-resistant and highly secure, eliminating the risk of fraud and error. No one, not even a system administrator, can delete it. In the case of diamonds, a blockchain ledger keeps a record of high-resolution photos of each diamond at every touchpoint along its journey. It holds certificates of authenticity, real-time records of every payment transaction, as well as product details like cut, clarity, color, carat, and diamond serial numbers. At the end of the buying cycle, there is a complete, auditable, and indisputable record of information. Blockchain technology gives us the ability to transform industries of all sorts, from diamonds to flowers, monetary transactions, or even things like contracts, deeds, records, and other public and private agreements. It frees up capital flows, speeds processes, lowers transaction costs, and most importantly, provides security and trust. We believe that blockchain will do for business what the internet did for communication, create new ways of working and leave more time for creativity and innovation.
So,
Most people,
as you've seen in that video, blockchain is a very, very powerful way in which we can revolutionize how we keep records. And for those who are wondering why is the president forming a blockchain task force? Why didn't he form an email task force when email came? Or why didn't he form a mobile phone task force when mobile phone technology came? Or YouTube task force? Because blockchain is actually a very big deal. It's an extremely big deal in terms of how we can eliminate some of our biggest challenges as human beings. And these challenges are mostly pegged to do with trust, yeah? And how we can enhance our transactions by removing intermediaries. Let me give you an example. To transfer money by cryptocurrency, I can't remember, look for that transaction, but it costs close to nothing. To transfer even $1 million via blockchain might not cost you more than 1,000 shillings. Try do that through a bank. Yeah. Even M-Pesa today, transfer 20,000 shillings and see how much you pay. So by removing intermediaries, it makes transactions cheaper and faster, and removes a lot of barriers to entry. Remember, if I'm in business and I'm being charged by every intermediary I use, that cost, I'll pass it down to my customers. So something that would have costed 100 shillings to my customer in a blockchain type of exchange environment and in a blockchain trust network would maybe cost 150 in the traditional way of doing things. So blockchain will also lead to the lowering of the cost of accessing goods and services. Is there any question up to there? Yes, Maraga.
I think from today's view of blockchain and in relation to yesterday, for all these technologies to succeed, there's an aspect of integrity of the data being loaded to these devices or say technologies.
Yes.
For example, for a smart city to operate well, the example is from the census last year.
Yes.
The first thing that came up on announcement of the results was it was doctored.
Yes, yes, yes.
So when you find a scenario where people doubt what the data the government's giving, there will be doubt even in these blockchains. How am I sure that Tom owns this land when I can walk into lands and change the name? Then I can sell to 3-4 people, then I get my money and leave the system.
Yes, yes.
So bottom line of these whole technologies, I think, should be integrity of the data being uploaded. That's
true.
My view.
And yes, you're actually very right. And I'd mentioned that in the example of lands, that before the land ministry or the land department decides to create the first block, the first block might be, in their case, all the acreage of Kenya, everything that is within the map of Kenya. That could be the first block. The second block could be maybe, I don't know how the land is administered, but they might say the second block is all the provinces or all the counties, yeah? And then the third block maybe is now a block that contains the gazetted land and the degazetted land that can be used for by the citizenry. And the gazetted land like forests, national parks, that could be the third block. And the blocks will go on that way up to my 8th quarter piece of land in Kajiado that I bought last month. So that my piece of land might be on the 15,000th block, yeah, from the first block. So when the government decides to go to use blockchain, one of the things that must be done is the verification of this data. And I've said that in the case of land, there might be a process where all the landowners are involved, because they are going to be participants in this blockchain, are involved in the verification of land. And this verification is not just bringing a title deed. Verification could also involve solving any disputes that exist. That yes, there's a verification process happening in Kitui Land's office, and Tom has arrived there with a title to a piece of land, and Mudeu has also arrived there with a copy of the same title, claiming ownership to the same piece of land. So before the blockchain starts, the judicial system must come in and say, and adjudicate the matter and say that actually this land belongs to this person. And then that is the record that will be entered in this block that is being started. When it comes to, for example, you mentioned about the population data. How do we verify that indeed Wajir County has the 3 million people that the records are saying, yet the leaders from there are saying, no, we're actually 7 million. Yeah? There is no way of verifying that, because none of these people have a way of, we have no way of IDing these people. And our current system, which is the national identity card, is in a mess. You guys all know that. Our ID system is a mess, and that's why the government is trying to introduce these new ways of identification, like Huduma number. Maybe they might come up with a new way and say, this is your digital ID. You see, calling it a digital ID and giving somebody a string of 64 alphanumeric characters as his ID won't really help much. So we might call it Huduma number and maybe give you a string of 10 characters which are now linked to your actual digital ID, which is maybe stored somewhere, which you can access in future. So we are not just going to start blockchains tomorrow just because we are now excited that your presentation vile nimesikia kesho, call the land minister, you need to start blockchain tomorrow. It has to be a long process that we need to verify this data. If there are any disputes, they are resolved. If we have doubts about the way we count people, then let us give every citizen a digital ID. So when these guys come and count me and my family in my house, remember Huduma number was even to be gotten by kids of a certain age. When they come to count me in my house, they won't find 4 people and then in their records write, hapo palikuwa mtu mmoja tu. They can't do that. Right now with the current system, they can do that. Yeah. So when the data is collected by the National Bureau of Statistics, they say, kwa Tom kunaishi mtu mmoja tu. That guy is a loner. Yet, that guy came and found, the enumerator came and found 7 people in my house, but decided to record 1 for their own reason. Or they might have recorded 7, but then when the data was being processed and analyzed, they say, hapana, hii wacha tuweke moja. Kwa sababu boss amesema, for one reason or the other. But if we do population census by use of blockchain and digital IDs, then already, if statistics are released that say Kitui County has 1.2 million people, that is correct. No one can doubt that. Yeah. If the records are released and say Wajir County has 7 million people, no one can contest that. And this data now, this blockchain, that is this population or people's registry blockchain, will now be running, and everyone, so if everyone gets a digital ID and becomes part of the registrar of persons blockchain that they will create, we are all participants in that blockchain. Tomorrow or another day, for one reason or the other, I lose a family member, then I will update my block and say, oh, we were 7, but now we are 6. Yeah. And there is a way in which this deduction, this 6th person, can be verified. Because again, if it's my relative and I remove him from the blockchain and the block is updated, I can do that maliciously. Maybe tumekosana and then I decide, I'll make the government see you as a dead person. And then update blockchain. There are mechanisms to prevent that. So it has to start from far. It doesn't have to start from, let us create the block today. We have to put in place measures to ensure that the fundamentals are right. There are no disputes, that the data is correct, that we are going to start the chain with. So that when we start the blockchain for the population of Kenya, under maybe the registrar of persons, we start from a clean slate and we say, hatutotumia hizi ID numbers za kitambo where everyone has an ID. Some people even have 2. Yeah, that is what the government needed to do away with the old way of doing things. And when they're introducing Huduma number and other systems, maybe the way it was sold wasn't good, but the concept behind it is very powerful. When the government says we want to move to Huduma number, that concept is actually aimed moving us forward. But people read a lot of politics into it and very many things. Yeah? So the point is that before we do a land blockchain, we must have a way of identifying people. And that way, a digital way of identifying people. And that way is not the national ID card that we carry in our wallets. Yeah. So have I answered that?
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah, asante. So we can create several blockchains, as I've mentioned. We can create one for land records in Kenya. So that is the official blockchain for land records in Kenya. And it's accessible to everyone. This being land records, this can be made public. Yeah, everyone can join. Mimi nikipata ka loan kwa sako niende ninunue A8 huko Kajiado, pia mimi ni member wa Lands blockchain. Nikioa nipate mtoto, mimi nakuwa member wa the births and deaths registry blockchain. Nikianza kusupply NYS na goods, nakuwa member wa blockchain ya government suppliers. Nikitaka ku exchange money, I become a member of the blockchain that deals with cryptocurrency. So as you can see there, cryptocurrency is just but one of the many possible blockchains people can create. If I'm hiring somebody, he says he's been to Harvard, I can go to the Ivy League university's blockchain and confirm that this person is not a fraud. Yes, you are in Harvard, but maybe you are visiting your cousin, you aren't schooling there. Or maybe you are in Harvard, but you didn't perform too well. And you can present to me counterfeit transcripts and degrees, but with blockchain, that is gone. So if HR in a certain company is hiring somebody, all they need to do is go to the correct blockchain, maybe Ministry of Education or Commission for Higher Education blockchain, and confirm, is this person saying who they say they are? Because right now it is very easy for me to go to, let me use in this case, University of Nairobi. Not that I know someone there who can do that, but it's possible for me to go to the University of Nairobi Central Registry and tell this guy, by the way, kuna job kubwa sana I'm aiming for. Na nataka uniweke kwa records. Useme nilikuwa hapa from 1984 to 1989 and I was studying electrical engineering. That can be done. Alafu nimwambie nitengezee degree. And when the HR calls the university, ataambia, yeah, Tom was our student here, because they're looking at records that can be modified. But with blockchain, you can't modify. If you are not there in 1985 to 19 whatever, then you cannot insert yourself, because to insert yourself in that blockchain, you will need to modify each and every record in that chain. And that will cost you money in terms of computing power. It will cost you time. It might even take, there's a blockchain for, I can't remember, there's Ethereum, one of the blockchains that handle cryptocurrencies. It would take like 1,700 years of continuous decrypting each and every transaction for me to insert myself and to modify and commit fraud on the cryptocurrency. The same thing for records for lands. If this piece of land belonged to Mr. X, there is no way in blockchain I can say this piece of land belongs to Mr. Y. Absolutely no way. So we can create trust networks or blockchains to handle the various data that we share. If you come to my office and say, I am Mr. So-and-so representing this company, and we have this deal for you, how do I verify you're Mr. So-and-so? I can use blockchain. Because if I say, prove to me you are so-and-so, you might unleash an ID, which might contain your name and your face, saying you are this Nigerian banker who can fund my business, yet it is not true. You understand? So I can go to the Nigerian blockchain that maybe manages the list of bankers, or I can go to, if you are a lawyer, I can go to the Nigerian Bar Association blockchain and confirm that you're actually a lawyer from Nigeria and you're not a conman. Yeah. So we can create very many blockchains, and it is only a coincidence that the first application that people came to know of, or the first blockchain that people heard of, was a cryptocurrency blockchain. And people have been associating blockchains with cryptocurrencies. And you mentioned blockchain, it is synonymous to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually one of the cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin is a blockchain started by some people. Then there's Ethereum, which is a blockchain started by some people, but they are both digital currencies. There was one guy who was in the news the other day in Kenya who had created a blockchain, cryptocurrency blockchain called Nuru Coin. There was some controversy around that. People lost money because they did not understand what that was, and people lost money, unfortunately. But today we can decide in this class we create our own blockchain, yeah, and we can run it. We can decide let's create a blockchain and call it whatever we want to call it, and we will be up and running. Kila mtu atoe shilingi 1,000 tuanzishe blockchain leo, where we'll say Etiko 1,000, Tom 1,000, Abdi 1,000, Rose 1,000, tuanzishe our own cryptocurrency, and it will work. And if we trust each other, we can exchange money. So if Rose needs to give Abdi 100 shillings, she records in a block and then broadcasts to the whole block and say, hey, nilipatia Abdi 100. Yeah, in terms of our coins. Yeah. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that all blockchains can be accessed by anyone and read by everyone. And there are several types of blockchain. There are public blockchains, like the cryptocurrency blockchains are public blockchains. Today, if I want to join Bitcoin, I can do that, and we'll see how I can do that. If I want to join a blockchain that maybe monitors quality of something, maybe I can join. Yeah. There are private blockchains. For example, a bank might decide we'll do away with all this traditional way of verifying users and using ID cards and saving their data in a database where some of our staff can actually defraud us money. So we are going to start our own Equity Bank blockchain where all our transactions are kept. So that is a private blockchain. And in this blockchain, only the people with bank accounts can access it, or only the bank staff might access it, for example. And they cannot modify it. So that already kills fraud in that bank completely by just going blockchain. Then there are federated blockchains. Yeah, so you said a public blockchain is a blockchain network. Anyone is allowed to join. Private, a single organization like a bank can own it. And a federated blockchain is, for example, Equity Bank says, because we work in a banking environment, not Equity Bank, Central Bank might say, because we work in a banking environment where trust is very critical, we'd want each and every bank in Kenya to belong to one blockchain, which will belong to Central Bank of Kenya. So Equity, Standard, KCB, Jamii Bora, Tom and Sons Bank, I hope the universe is listening, Tom and Daughters actually, yeah. All those should belong to the Central Kenya blockchain. So that is a federated blockchain where one entity runs the blockchain, but the participants are private. Yeah. So it's not a blockchain that I can connect to and see what is happening in this central bank blockchain. This blockchain is there, it exists, but only the banks can access it. The banks might have their own mini blockchains to handle transactions with their customers on the customer-facing side. On the regulator-facing side, they might have a blockchain that they belong to all of them as banks. But on the customer-facing side, each bank might have its own blockchain to run their own transactions as business entities. Yeah. So these are the blockchain network types. So today, if we start a blockchain, maybe to have all private schools come together and create one blockchain, and maybe it's managed by the Private Schools Association of Kenya. I don't know whether it exists. Then that would be an example of a federated blockchain. But if the Ministry of Education says, we are going to create a blockchain where we will put all the results since we started doing KCP or KCE online in a blockchain, then a HR somewhere in Nakuru wants to verify whether this Tom who wants to apply for this job is actually a graduate of University of Nairobi, then they can easily connect to it and verify. So in a pictorial format, we have public. Now public, there are two types. There is public and closed. Yeah. For example, a voting system would be, we can actually use blockchain to vote and prevent vote stuffing. Hii mambo ya kuongeza kura zimetikiwa kwa ballot box. With blockchain, it will be history. So you can have a public and closed blockchain owned by the IEBC, which can ensure that no fraud happens. Yeah, voting records, or maybe a whistleblower blockchain where people can report fraud and corruption. Then it can be public and open. For example, cryptocurrencies. Right now I can join one, any. I'll go choose the one that suits me. Maybe betting or maybe video games. And public and open also like Ethereum and Bitcoin are public and open. Then they are private. There's private closed and private open. Private closed maybe might be DOD, their data, or how many tanks they have, where they are, how old they are, when they were serviced, what weapons they have, what deals they are striking with the defense suppliers. That is private and closed. In fact, even their budget cannot be scrutinized by parliament. Then there's private and open. Supermarkets might come together and say, let us create one big blockchain to assure our customers that whatever we are supplying them is what we say it is. Or they can be able to track and know if somebody buys an apple from Carrefour, Carrefour, I can verify that this apple was maybe planted, where it was planted, how long it took to get to the supermarket, how old that apple is from the day it was picked, what the temperature of the lorry that was transporting it was throughout the journey, all that. That is an example of a private chain. And then government financial records is private and open, where it belongs to the government, but if I am paying for a government service, I can connect to it and pay. Or corporate blockchains, like we've discussed, where banks can own their own blockchains. Let us see an example of how New York City is utilizing blockchain in various areas: education, managing of waste, and record keeping and verification and all that. Let's see.
I'm Clyde Vannell. I'm the New York State Assembly member for the 33rd Assembly District. I'm also the chair of the subcommittee for Internet and New Technologies. Even though blockchain has been introduced and been out there for 10 years, for about a decade, for about a decade, it's still in its infancy stages. If our systems can be compromised in all these different places, that's a problem. And it's a problem that's even a conversation for our country. It's a problem when that's a conversation for our state. It's a major problem when it actually happened in Brooklyn. 127,000 voter records expunged. I mean, how does that happen? So one of the things is that, there must have been one point of contact for that to happen. But, if the voter information was on blockchain, was on a blockchain, if it was on a distributed ledger, almost impossible to be able to do that. So that's why it's so critical for us to explore the different uses of blockchain, with the government. The fastest area of adoption from my vantage point is our education system, our SUNY system. So we have engaged SUNY to try to use certain use cases to be able to put transcripts, student information on the blockchain. So we're trying to go through SUNY. And because our SUNY system of 64 campuses and smaller departments or what have you, we can silo those uses and those test cases easier than within an agency or what have you. So we're trying that. We're going to try that with the schools.
So that's an example, a good example of how blockchain is being utilized in government. Let's immediately watch another video, then we'll take a brief break of how retail businesses are making use of blockchain. Let's also watch that immediately.
I purchased a pack of mangoes. I came into my staff meeting. I put them on the table and I said, your traceback exercise starts right now. And we timed how long it took them to get the information for each point in the food system all the way back to the farm. And I'm not going to give you the results after the pilot, but it's going to be good. When a customer shops in our stores, we know they expect great prices. We know they expect fast, clean, and friendly service. But an unspoken expectation is that they expect the products that they buy in our stores to be safe. You know, when there's a food event or a food scare, what you want to do is you want to be fast, but you want to be right. That food product is guilty until proven innocent. We at Walmart will actually pull all of the product until we know what is the implicated product and we can put the safe product back out. And so imagine if we could pinpoint with certainty within minutes, not days, that it was the implicated product. Walmart and IBM are working to make that a reality. If you think about the food system, it's pretty complex. It involves farmers, processors, distributors. And the way traceability is done today, each segment of the food system does it their own way. Most actually do it on paper or on systems that don't speak to each other. And so you can never have a full view of what's happening in the food system. What we hope to do with blockchain is bring all food safety system stakeholders and collaborate so that we do it one best way. We can do it very quickly and efficiently. Blockchain is a digital ledger that allows different segments of the food system to capture information about the product, what they've done to it, where that product has been. If we're linking that data with other data points, the Internet of Things, all that information will yield to insights that will allow us to have a safer, more affordable, and sustainable food system. But we don't believe traceability is the goal. We believe that transparency is the ultimate goal. Blockchain will give us the ability to not only track where food came from, but how it was produced. Was it produced safely? Was it produced responsibly? Is it sustainably grown? How many dates of shelf life are left on that product? The food system is a shared responsibility. And for blockchain and traceability and transparency to work, we need a lot of people working together. And so we're excited to be working with IBM on this blockchain initiative. But it's not just Walmart and IBM. We actually have some of our suppliers participating in this pilot. We've got some universities also participating in the pilot. And so we'll make sure that all stakeholders work together for a safer and better food system.
So in that example, we've seen how Walmart is using blockchain to ensure the quality of food and traceability of food. And in that case that they've mentioned there, for example, if for some reason they realize that customers are complaining that maybe the mangoes that they're buying from them are spoiled. If you go to supermarket right now, mangoes are usually like in one large place, like 100 mangoes, and most of the time they're usually from different suppliers. So if a customer comes back and says, ile maembe mlinyunyizia ni mbaya, or the apples that you guys sold me had gone bad, how does that supermarket get to know who supplied this? With blockchain, they can know these were supplied by Tom and company. And when Tom was supplying, it looks like it took 8 hours instead of 2 hours to deliver to our warehouse. So it means maybe they were just seated somewhere, not refrigerated. Or these mangoes that are going bad and the customers are complaining are older mangoes. They've been in the store for 8 days or 9 days. And we can trace them and identify them and remove them. So that is what that guy is saying, that with traceability, they're able to quickly take action. Right now, if you go to the supermarket, if you go to Carrefour and tell them, can you tell me from which farm this mango came? They look at you like you're mad or something, because they do not have that data. Not only do they not have it, they do not know whether that data exists in the first place. But with blockchain, you can even be told this mango came from this farm, and this mango was plucked on Saturday at 2 p.m. and within 2 hours it was in our stores. That info is available. So that's what they're talking about when they talk about goods and produce traceability. And not only that, it will also eliminate theft. Right now there's a supermarket which I won't mention that is in the news that they're not doing very well. I can assure you that the cause is most likely employee theft and pilferage. I can assure you, either senior or junior employee. With blockchain, you can't do that. So even me as an investor, if I'm buying shares of that supermarket and they're using blockchain, I'll be assured that in as much as this is a family business, if we are using blockchain, there would be no underhand dealings, or they will not run it down by falsifying records or by failing to pay suppliers. And when you talk of blockchains having contracts in them, a good example is when you're using blockchain, for example, in the case of a supermarket, the smart contracts in the blockchain are usually executed automatically. So for example, if we have a blockchain that says, that is tracing these mangoes or these apples from the farm, we'd have a smart contract at the point where these mangoes enter our supermarket from the supplier. And the minute we record using our IoT input devices into the blockchain that that mango that was harvested on Saturday in Patrick's farm is now in our possession, a smart contract can be executed in such a way that that blockchain will tell our bank to pay that farm. So if I'm a supplier to a supermarket, I might maybe want to ask them, do you guys have smart contracts in your blockchain? Because I don't want to supply things to you and then it becomes a cat and mouse game, me chasing my payments. But if you have a blockchain that has auto-executable smart contracts, the minute my mangoes hit your store, I get paid. So that already eliminates the common problem in Kenyan supply chain where we have issues of deferred payments. The same thing, if we are looking at the blockchain of the treasury, for example, or a ministry that I'm supplying something to, and the blockchain has smart contracts that auto-execute that the minute I supply whatever I'm supplying to these guys, then I am assured that I'll be paid. Then I'll be more confident interacting with them. But if I ask them whether they have smart contracts in their blockchain, they say, no, we're not sure, or they are ambiguous about it, then I might rethink my engagement with them. Right now, if you ask somebody, will you guys pay me on time? They say, yo, kawaida, we'll 30 days notice, we'll pay you, no problem. 30 days arrive, 60 days, 90 days, the people who've been auctioned because they took loans to supply goods and services to institutions, both private and government, and they have never been paid. If we were doing that in a blockchain environment, that would not happen. That would not happen. So I'd like us to take a brief break for 5 minutes, then we can reconvene. So we can continue with the session. Some of us have requested to be out of the session by 1 due to some meetings. So we need to continue and be done a few minutes to 1. So we've talked a lot about blockchain, what it is, and we've said that blockchain is a trust engine. And if it's a trust engine, we work to ensure that when we start a blockchain, there is the initial trust that is there. That we trust that these records for all the students' performance data in this university that we are going to enter into the blockchain are the correct details. And they are not the details that have been doctored over the years. So there is some work needed to be done in as far as verifying this information. And when it comes to adoption of blockchain, that is where now need for verification of the data that is being used needs to happen before the first block is created. And our discussion so far has now made us realize why blockchain is attracting a lot of attention, especially in government and private sector, and why there was even a blockchain task force. It was called the Blockchain and AI Task Force. It's called the Blockchain and AI Task Force. I was really hoping I was in that task force, but anyway. But now let's go further and look at cryptocurrency, which is what most people associate with the blockchains. Yeah, most people think blockchains are cryptocurrencies. Now we need to understand that cryptocurrency is not digital currency. Yeah, my bank account now with 1,000 shillings in it as the balance. That 1,000 shillings is not a note kept somewhere in a drawer by the bank. That is a digital currency. It's in digital format. Cryptocurrency is different. Cryptocurrency is based on blockchain. Oh, there's a typo there. It's a form of public blockchain that records flow of value as participants exchange value in the form of currency. Remember, we said blockchain can be used to record the flow of value in online. That I've sold you this land, and you in consideration you paid me this much. That is a flow of value. You gain the value of owning a piece of land. Maybe you wanted to be a farmer or build a commercial or your residential house there. And I gain the value of owning some money that I can maybe invest or do something with or pay for whatever I need to pay with. And we had mentioned that in blockchains, there needs to be trust and consensus. The same way we said that I need to trust that this person selling me this piece of land is who he says he is. And the government can do that by creating digital IDs for everyone who participates in any government blockchain. Or that digital ID is what you can use in most, even in private maybe institutions. Like if you go to a bank, they do not need to know your national ID or your name. You just need to present your digital ID. So your bank account is linked to your digital ID, and you can participate in that bank's blockchain. On the cryptocurrency front, however, consensus is achieved by cryptography, and trust is achieved by cryptography. Because the reason why cryptography is used, cryptography, I'll show you an example of a cryptography by a sample. The reason why cryptography is used is because it is extremely difficult to decrypt encrypted information. If my transaction has been encrypted, my selling of land to Paul has been encrypted, I can decrypt it using my ID. but I can encrypt it using my ID and forward that transaction into the blockchain. And only me can see that, yes, I did this. Yes, these are my pieces of land, and that ensures my anonymity. It is very difficult to get an encrypted key and reverse it back so that you get a string of 64 characters, alphanumeric characters, and reverse it back and realize, huyu jamaa alinunua land hapa. This guy exchanged value with this person. It's very difficult. So basically how cryptocurrency works, this is a diagram indicating that, is that a user, assuming we are all in a blockchain and I need to pay for a service using a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum. So I will initiate a transaction using my digital signature, and then say maybe I've given $100 to so-and-so. Yeah. And then I'll broadcast that information to all the participants in that blockchain and say, this is what I'm doing. Then the third step is that all those participants in that blockchain will need to validate that actually that is true. Tom is giving $100 to Paul. First of all, does he have the $100 in Bitcoin? Does he have them in our records? Because I might decide to give $100 to Paul and immediately give another $100 to John and another $100 to Mary. Yet I do not have that money. So the nodes, that is all the participants in the blockchain, will then validate the transaction. The same way in the land blockchain, if I'm selling 10 acres of land and the blockchain out there only indicates I have 5, that transaction will not be validated by the people in that chain. And they will reject it. And the person I'm selling to will notice that it's been rejected because I'm falsifying records. So once these transactions are validated, the first node, because what usually happens is that when the information is broadcasted to all the nodes are the participants, yeah? So everyone with a Bitcoin account is a node and is a participant in the blockchain, and they do what is known as Bitcoin mining. We'll see what that is. The first person to validate the transaction and say, yes, this guy has actually 10 acres. That person gets rewarded the transaction fees that I paid for that transaction. Yeah. That transaction fee won't go to lands. You see the way you go to lands and pay some fee, I don't know, transfer fee or something. The transaction fee goes directly to that person. So if I'm buying something online using Bitcoin and it costs $100, I will initiate a transaction of maybe $100 and one, and that one is a transaction fee, and broadcast out. So whoever validates it first gets that $1 on top. So that person becomes richer by one coin. Let's not call it dollars. Let's call it Bitcoin in this case. That person becomes richer by 1 Bitcoin. And then once he's done validation, he broadcasts again and says, this record is correct. You guys can save it in your ledgers. And then everyone in that chain saves it. Yeah. And when they save, of course, there is consensus. It means, yes, we agree that this calculation has been done correctly. And the blocks will be updated. So when I pay Mary $100, 100 coins, Mary will receive in her ledger, it will increase by 100 coins. And the guy who verified it first will receive 1 coin. So the person who verified it first is called a miner. When you hear Bitcoin mining, those are people who participate in Bitcoin purely to verify transactions using their compute resources. I can set up very powerful computers, and because my computers are very powerful and very fast, I end up computing that verification computation very fast than anyone else. So for somebody to successfully mine Bitcoin, you need to have very powerful computers. And you'll see how people are doing it. Yeah. So that anytime somebody out there broadcasts a transaction, due to my computing power and ability to do these computations very fast, I get that one coin that was offered as a transaction fee. Slowly, as my computing power grows, I end up making money. So all of a sudden, I might have 10 Bitcoins out of nowhere because I have assisted that blockchain of Bitcoin verify transactions. As a participant, I'm being rewarded for verifying these transactions, as opposed to that transaction fee going to a central organization. You go to a bank, if I was transferring that money in a bank in form of 100 units, the bank will charge me transaction fee and keep it to themselves. So you see what is happening there is that the blockchain for cryptocurrency completely removes the bank intermediary in the equation. When I am transferring currency from myself to Mary or to John, I do not have to go through a bank. All I need to go through is through our network, and people can verify. And that distributed mutual trust is very hard to crack, especially if there are many people participating. It's very hard to crack. So that is how cryptocurrency works in a nutshell. And how do we, for example, have Bitcoin existing? How do we have Ethereum existing? How do we have all those forms of Bitcoin? There are very many by the way. You can name your Bitcoin whatever. Let us say, for example, we start a Bitcoin today. We decide, let us start a cryptocurrency called AfraCoin. And in this cryptocurrency, 100 shillings is equals to 1 AfraCoin. So all of us in this class, we will contribute 100 shillings. And we will create a first block that says Tom 100, Mohammed 100, Etiko 100, Mary 100, John 100, Abdurrahman 100. So we are there. So everyone has money. We create the first block. Tomorrow, Abdurrahman decides to pay Etiko 10 shillings. So he will broadcast to everyone in this chain and say, I want to pay Etiko 10 shillings. Then it so happens that Rose's computing system is very powerful, and it says, yes, actually, this guy has that money, and it is possible for him to give you 10 shillings. Then Abdurrahman says, well done, Rose, here is a shilling for you for verifying that. So Abdurrahman paying Etiko 10 shillings will happen. And all of us, including me, I'll update my block and say, initially we started with 100, 100, 100, everyone. But now, Etiko is now 110, Abdurrahman is now 90. And we all save that new record as that. And any other new transaction that happens, we append it to that. If Mary is giving John 30 coins, 30 Afra coins, or whatever number of coins, before she starts doing that, she first needs to get the hash of Abdurrahman and Etiko's transaction, that this transaction happened. This is the cryptographic hash. And then use that hash as part of her new block where she's transferring that money. And this new block, maybe Mohammed will be the first one to verify, and he'll get something for that. And when Mohammed verifies, he creates that new block and gives everyone, and everyone updates their records, and so on and so forth. So we might be in the 1000th block, then I decide we need to incorporate more people. Then we bring in one more person. That person will join that block at that point where we were, but they'll have a record of all the transactions since day one when this coin started. And because we are so many now, maybe we are 1,000 people or 2,000 people in this AfraCoin blockchain, it is very hard for Tom to come and pay Paul money that he does not have, because everyone will give him a side eye and say you do not have that money. Yeah. and so on and so forth. Or I might give him 100, then I try reverse it. I can't, because of the consensus. Once consensus is reached, I can't reverse. So that in a nutshell is how cryptocurrency works. Now I've put participant in star here because for the participants to decide to start this new coin, I must trust that when so-and-so says they have 100 shillings and we want to start this, they will actually bring 100 shillings to the table to get one coin. Yeah. Now, as I've said, the person who verifies this transaction first would end up doing that because they have the most powerful system, because we will all start verifying at the same time. But if your computing system is slow and mine is faster, I'll verify before you and make the money, yeah, and then broadcast the new block. So cryptocurrency mining is whereby people join a cryptocurrency blockchain for the sole purposes of verifying the transactions that happen there, yeah. And these transactions are not usually like verified in 1 second like this, like when you're browsing the internet. For example, Bitcoin now takes about 10 minutes to verify a transaction. That is how much computation goes into one transaction. 10 minutes to verify one transaction. Ethereum is, I think, it's around 2 minutes. And Ethereum is 2 minutes because not only are they not as many as Bitcoin in terms of the number of blocks, but they have a unique way of doing it that makes that verification faster. And Ethereum is attracting a lot of attention because of that. And they have unique ways of doing Bitcoin, doing cryptocurrency, which we won't discuss. Other than just cryptocurrency, unlike Bitcoin, which is mostly focusing on the cryptocurrency value, Ethereum is also designed in a way that it is very good for things like transactions, contracts, like smart contracts, where if this happens, then a contract is executed or an action is taken. Like if we are tracking supply chain with Ethereum, we can have a smart contract at the point of entry to the supermarket that if my goods arrive in the supermarket, this smart contract should execute and your bank should transfer money to me, or whatever that contract should say. Or maybe the minute these goods enter your supermarket, my countdown to 30 days to payment starts immediately. It doesn't start when you record that entry. It starts immediately when that act happens. Now, this process of verification that indeed this transaction is valid is usually known as proof of work. And proof of work is essentially like a puzzle, yeah? Where if I'm doing a transaction, in addition to the transaction information that I'm sending out, I will send out a puzzle, a cryptographic puzzle, for lack of a better word. And whoever solves that puzzle first gets the reward for doing that, yeah? So that is what Bitcoin mining is. And because people are setting up very powerful computers to do these things, it has been claimed, or it has been shown that cryptocurrency mining consumes a lot of power, yeah? Cryptocurrency mining consumes, and there are concerns about whether this currency is actually green, as in, by the fact that it's consuming so much power for recording transactions and keeping trust online and verification, is it really sustainable in as far as the environment is concerned? So those are the discussions that are happening around cryptocurrency mining. And there are many ways that people are coming up with them to reduce the amount of power consumed. I think right now, Bitcoin blockchain consumes power which is equivalent to like New Zealand. The power consumed in New Zealand is consumed in cryptocurrency. Yes, Titus.
Morning, Tom, or rather, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to find out On this part of mining, you said the first person who mines successfully is the one who is rewarded.
Yes.
Does it mean that once the transaction is on, the miners are now competing against each other so that the first one can get the reward?
Yes.
And isn't that, as you say, waste of power, or because now everybody is trying to compete?
Exactly.
To get the answer.
Yeah. It's actually wasteful, because when a transaction happens, everyone is doing that computation. You're consuming CPU space, CPU power. You're consuming electric power, and it's wasteful. So down there in this slide, it shows that the high computing power that somebody has increases the chances of this person solving the riddle. However, this high computing power is wasteful, because you have, like, if a blockchain has 60,000 participants, you have 60,000 participants trying to compete and consuming a lot of power for only one result. So there are new approaches. For example, instead of proof of work, there are new approaches, which is one is known as proof of stake. Yeah. So in proof of stake, we say, let us not do that. That is very wasteful in terms of power. Let us come up with an algorithm that will select a person. And this person is the person who will be selected to verify this transaction. And this person might be either selected randomly. There are algorithms for selecting randomly. There are algorithms based on how much money, how many coins you have. So if you have very many coins, chances are you will be selected very many times. And that's in the Bible. The rich will become richer and the poor become poorer. So that algorithm isn't very good, where the person with the most coins gets the first priority to verify the transaction. There are other algorithms that have been designed. For example, we might decide the person with the most transactions, or with the historical transaction pattern, then that person gets that chance. Yes, Victor?
Tom, I just wanted to get your opinion. Do you think cryptocurrencies will be the currency for the future? Do you think it will replace the current fiat system? And also, what's your opinion on what the CBK governor said, I think in 2018, when he was warning against the uptake of cryptocurrencies in mainly the banking industry and also other institutions?
Yes. My thinking is that at the moment there is resistance in terms of initially when central banks said that, it was simply out of them executing their mandate as per the law. Yeah. So when the central bank gave that caution, it was mostly in form of a caution that be cautious when you are doing these transactions, because according to the law, this is not legal tender. That's what they are doing. The task force, the blockchain task force, one of the recommendations was that the central bank needs to adopt and roll out a form of cryptocurrency for the country. That was one of the recommendations. So you see, between the time when central bank said that and the recommendations of the task force, people have learned a little bit more about the power of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And this task force saw that if we do this, we can stop so many issues to do with fraud, to do with the illegal transfer of funds, because now, if money belongs to the government, you cannot just transfer it and pay a supplier who supplied air. That would stop, blockchain would stop that. Yeah. So there is a mind shift in government also in terms of how cryptocurrencies are being approached. The other thing is that central banks, not necessarily the Kenyan one, are cautious because, number one, this is going to take power away from them. They will not have oversight over money. And there's a lot of debate on that in terms of how do we now regulate cryptocurrency if Tom is the one verifying transactions and not this bank. Yeah. So how do we regulate that? How do we modify regulation to ensure that in as much as Tom is verifying this transaction, transferring money from NYS to this supplier, we need to make sure that Tom wasn't compromised to say this transaction is correct. You understand? Or we need to ensure that the algorithms that were used to select Tom to verify this transaction were not dubious algorithms that made sure that only when this deal goes through, we will verify, now verify, such kind of thing. You understand? So slowly, what needs to be done is that the regulation framework around cryptocurrency needs to be put in place, and controls put in place to ensure that it is a system that works on its own. As to whether cryptocurrency will fully replace money and in terms of legal tender as we know it today, not very soon, but it will eventually happen. Right now, we cannot talk of setting up a Kenyan cryptocurrency coin when no one has a digital ID. How will they transact? They'll be left out of that, or it will not attract the critical mass needed to make it succeed. So we need to get our house in order first by those things. Move our identity verification process from offline, where unaambia hebu kipande yako nione, ama they look at you in the face and say, yeah, this is the person transacting, and according to my photo here, this is this person. Because most of the time when you go to the bank and you give your account number, the system will open up and there'll be a photo of you, the one that is supplied when you open the account, and they can verify this is you without even asking you what is your middle name or something like that. Because when the teller is transacting, he has a photo of you there. They're verifying. And for cryptocurrency to reach that level where it's being used in transactions, I believe that other forms of blockchain need first to be adopted. We must first have, for example, a blockchain in the registrar of persons first, before we talk of cryptocurrency to verify, so that people have digital IDs. We must have a blockchain, for example, in lands, where land transactions are in a blockchain. So when we create a cryptographic blockchain for Kenyan cryptocurrency, it can be linked there, so that when I sell land, you can pay me by linking that blockchain. There are ways in which these different chains can be linked. The land's blockchain can now be able to talk to the central bank blockchain and can connect to the registry blockchain to verify my ID and all that. So yes, it will happen, but not with the approach that people have, that let's create a cryptocurrency for Kenya. Like right now, it won't do much, yeah, until we put the systems and structures in place. And by system and structure, I mean the regulation around it and the foundational systems, like ensuring that we have digital IDs and all that. So it will happen, but not in the next 5 years, if you ask me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So when you talk of cryptocurrency mining, what usually happens is that you use computing resources. Again, it was found that specifically designed computing devices can compute faster. So if I'm doing cryptocurrency mining, I wouldn't do it on my laptop, because my laptop has a CPU, which other than just doing that mining, it is busy playing a song, it is busy trying to do other computations and running the software on it. So it won't be a very efficient way of mining. So they are specifically designed rigs. They're usually called rigs, but it's essentially a computer that is purpose built to do mining. That's all it does. It does not do I don't know, playing a game, listening to your favorite music, or watching YouTube. All it does is mining, and it contains a GPU. Remember, we said a CPU is designed to do very many things: play music, run your software in your computer, do whatever computations need to be done. But if we are doing only one thing, which is decrypting cryptography data for a cryptocurrency chain that I'm trying to authenticate, then I do not need to run a CPU. I can run a GPU. It is cheaper, it is faster, and gives me a higher chance of decrypting or giving the answer fast before anyone else. But then one rig like the one below here, this one here won't do much for you. If you join the Bitcoin network with one like this, chances are you might not really get any transaction verified by you. So people actually putting these rigs in one network so that you have so many rigs connected together working as one. And this picture here, this is a Bitcoin mining entity. So this guy has like thousands of these devices here interconnected, working as one. So if a transaction is announced on the Bitcoin network, these guys have a much higher chance of decrypting it than you with your one device here. Yeah. And all these devices are consuming power, remember that. And everyone else who has such a setup is also consuming power, trying to do the same calculations. So just because this guy has maybe 10 racks of these devices stacked up together, he might decrypt it faster than somebody who has 9.5 racks of the exact same devices. But both of them will consume close to the same amount of power to do that. Now, can you imagine 70,000 people doing the same thing in the country? So a new way is needed to do cryptocurrency mining. There are people whose sole job in the world, that is their career, that is their vocation, and that's what they do when they wake up and sleep, is to mine Bitcoin. And the reason why they do that, look at that. One Bitcoin right now, this is this morning, this is a screenshot this morning. One Bitcoin is 1 million shillings. One. So if I'm buying something, it does not mean that I have to buy it in units of, in whole numbers, like 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 3 Bitcoin. I might buy, for example, a phone online on a website that accepts Bitcoin for 0.0023 Bitcoins. I might own 1 Bitcoin myself, which is $1 million. So I might want to buy a phone that is worth 50,000. Kindly mute. There's somebody who's not muted. Hello. Kindly mute. Let me mute them. Okay, they're gone. So in this case, as you've seen here, 1 Bitcoin is $1 million. So if I have 1 Bitcoin in my Bitcoin wallet, and I need to buy or pay for something online, you can actually do that. There's actually a Bitcoin ATM in Sarit Center, if I'm not wrong. I don't know whether it's still there. It was there last year, where you can convert Bitcoins into Kenya shillings and withdraw if you have them. If I'm buying something worth 50,000 shillings and I have 1 Bitcoin, I will transfer the equivalent of that amount in Bitcoin, might be 0.00 something Bitcoins, yeah? Due to the hype that was with Bitcoin, in 15th December 2017, a Bitcoin reached 2 million bob. Look, 2 million bob. But the hype died and then it started rising again. And today, this is this morning, it's 1 million bob. So you see why some people are devoting a lot of their energy into mining, because they're making money. They're just setting up computing power and supplying it to the electricity, and you go fishing. Your system will just be busy mining for you and making you money. But for you to make any considerable money in Bitcoin, in terms of being rewarded for participating. You cannot do it with this. You need to set up several of these systems. Yeah. This is also another screenshot that I took this morning for the various cryptocurrencies that exist. There's Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, there's Tether, there's XRP, there's another coin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, there's Litecoin, and the market capitalizations for each of them is that. Can you see how Bitcoin is way ahead? That is why everyone calls cryptocurrencies Bitcoins. Yeah. The same way you call searching Googling, just because it's the most, it's like the de facto engine to search. Most people call cryptocurrencies Bitcoin because Bitcoin market capitalization is more than all the other competitors combined. Yeah. And this is the price of Bitcoin, which of course, if you translate into shillings, you get a value. And this is the volume of Bitcoin transactions in the last 24 hours, 19 billion worth of dollars, in equivalent dollars, were transacted. And how many Bitcoins are in circulation? Only 18 million Bitcoins. Imagine, only 18 million. But this is the value they are carrying, 19 billion. So as you can see, this is one way in which value can be moved around digitally in a trust environment. So this data is available online, you can see. So if I want to be able to join maybe a cryptocurrency blockchain, very many factors will determine whether I join Bitcoin or Ethereum. I might decide, for me to make anything in Bitcoin, I need very powerful computing, which I don't have, or I do not have the money to purchase. And maybe Ethereum's algorithm of consensus building or verification, or selecting who can authenticate a transaction, is fairer to my size. So let me join Ethereum. Or I might decide I'll do away with everyone here and start my own coin, cryptocurrency. So I need to get people. I need people to trust me. I need to create. We can, but even you as an individual, you can create one today and get a following. Yeah. And I foresee, and you'll call me maybe in a year or two, I foresee cryptocurrency scams being the next pyramid schemes in Kenya, where maybe an institution like a church starts their own coin. Maybe they might call it after their pastor or their daddy, and say, we're starting this coin, we are going to sell it across. So people will end up being told, you guys join, let's form the initial phase, and as people continue building, you guys will make money. Then they lose their money. That is how some people lost money last year, and last year but one, through somebody who started a coin. I won't mention the name for fear of legal issues, but they started a coin in Kenya, called it some name, fashioned it after a pyramid scheme. People do not understand what that is. You flash this screen to somebody who does not understand Bitcoin. Naambia Bitcoin moja ni milioni moja. Sasa imagine ukiwa na Bitcoin 5 tu. And you see they are not relating what a Bitcoin is to actual legal tender. To them, 5 Bitcoins ni kama shilingi 5. Or maybe to them, a Bitcoin is like buying a share in a company, and they end up getting fleeced. And because of that, there is the element of blockchain and regulation that comes into place. How do we ensure that people do not use blockchains for other means? Or if as a country we want to regulate blockchain, first of all, is Bitcoin, or is that cryptocurrency, a legal tender? Is it a financial tool, or is it a security like a share? If I buy 1 Bitcoin, am I buying a share into something, or it is money? So if it is a share, is it Capital Markets Authority to regulate it? Maybe, maybe not, depending on the answer. If it's a financial tool, is it the central bank? Maybe, maybe not. If the way Bitcoin, the way blockchain works is in such a way that there might be the need for regulations on the ICT front. Yeah, maybe the ICT regulator might be the one responsible. Yeah, or it could, maybe we need a new regulator, a blockchain regulator, or a trust and consensus regulator, or a regulator that combines everything together. Like if you want to be a Bitcoin miner, maybe you need a license for you to consume more than maybe 5 kilowatts of power for the purposes of Bitcoin. Yeah, and regulations keep on changing and adapting to situation. Right now, people are talking of social media account holders with a very large following being considered as being regulated as media houses, because whatever you say, 200,000 people will hear. That is the same thing that happens when KBC or NTV say something. Yes, a second. Yes, a second. So in that, then we need to look at regulation. We should be done in a few minutes. Huh? For those who are attending, there's a meeting which some people are attending. So in the next 5 minutes, we'll be done. So then the laws need to be looked at in such a way that maybe we might say that if we are going to start a blockchain for lands, and maybe there's a reward for verifying transactions, maybe you get a point. What is the consensus algorithm around that? Is it the acreage of land that you have? Is it how up to date you are with your taxes? Because we might say you should not verify if you've not filed your returns, for example, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot that can be discussed in as far as blockchain and regulation is concerned. And this is something we can't cover here. This is actually a topic on its own to be covered maybe in 2 or 3 days, blockchain and regulation. How do we approach it? But there is need to ensure that even as we adopt blockchain, the regulatory considerations that arise need to be addressed. For example, jurisdiction. If I'm mining here in Nairobi, I might end up verifying a transaction that took place in the US. So what is the jurisdiction of the US government as far as that transaction that was verified by me is concerned, and so on and so forth? Because this is happening on the digital plane. It does not recognize country borders and all that. If I'm in Bitcoin or Ethereum, I'm in Ethereum. I'm not in Ethereum from Kenya or from New Zealand or from Australia. I'm in Ethereum, and that's it. Things to do with the regulation of the technology, intellectual property, liabilities and risks. If we are going to have smart contracts in these blockchains, what makes them legally enforceable in Kenya? Yeah, there has to be a link there that a smart contract should be legally enforceable. So all those are the things that we need to look at, and that discussion can go on for a very long time. So I'd like to stop there and invite any questions. And if for example, you are running to a meeting, you are safe to leave and attend that meeting, but we can remain here for a few minutes for those who have questions, and you can ask questions. Any question? So as the session helped you understand what blockchain is, and is it something that you would now view differently based on what we've discussed in terms of how it can be applied and used? And the other thing that you can do is try see scenarios where blockchain can be applied. What problems do we face? How can we use blockchain to solve them? That is the essence of governments and the institutions and private sector interest in blockchain. So can I assume that there are no questions up to now? comments, questions? So I think we can close, and we should be able to now summarize tomorrow in all what we've done and covered, and